Here's a phrase that possibly many people will have heard. I hope they've heard it because it's a clinical term. It was developed by two scientists, two researchers, whose name I can't pronounce that well, but I'm going to have a go at. It's by Szyf and Meaney. Meaney I can get, the other one I can't. But let me just show it to you on this piece of paper that I took note of it on. Okay, there you are. The name of the two researchers. And the term, as you probably just grasped then, was epigenetic methylation. Quite like that. Flows off the tongue rather well, epigenetic methylation. I saw this article in a magazine called Discover. Just type or Google that and you can probably get to the article. Let me just read some notes, or just from some notes I made at a particular point in the article, bearing in mind my wife is mentally ill and being treated as an inpatient, and I also am mentally ill, and the topic of suicide has, shall we say, not been far from our personal experience. Apparently, in a paper produced in 2008, these two men compared the brains of those people who had committed suicide with a view to looking at an area called the hippocampus, a region central to memory acquisition and a region central to how we handle stress. And they noticed in their post-mortem examination of the brains of these people who had unfortunately committed suicide that there was an excess of a particular chemical, or an excess of methylation in the genes of those who had committed suicide. They were able to study this, I believe, by means of post-mortem blood test. So that takes me on to the sort of descriptive part, which is to say exactly what exactly is. Let's define some terms here. Epigenetic methylation. Well, if I've read the article correctly, I think the best definition I could come up with is to say that yes, our genes, our DNA define us, all the Crick and Watson stuff, all the the old mouth swab there from the police, and once they got that on the end of their swab, they can prove that it was you who did it, and not you or billions and billions and billions of other people. Yeah, it's got to be you because it's your DNA. Well, this is kind of something, if you like, that sticks to the DNA. Epigenetic methylation. These epigenes, or kind of external genes, if you like, modify the DNA in a way that it is then transmitted further down your line. You have offspring, they have offspring, and it goes on and on and on. And if you like, these markers, in the article they describe them almost like an index card. Yep, these markers or index cards remain attached to this part of your genetic structure, your genetic predisposition, shall we say. So, obviously, you could have a predisposition genetically for certain types of cancer, but equally, you can have a predisposition for mental illness. And it was found in their research, obviously before 2008, that people can show the effect of stressors in their lives to make somehow these markers, these epigenetic markers, actually stick to their genes. And for example, you may find somebody who was perhaps ignored by a mother suffering from postnatal depression, perhaps in some cases a mother who was an alcoholic, and this very early bond, which would produce kind of chemicals in their brain that would make them possibly less susceptible to the negative effects of stressors or environmental factors. Well, this doesn't happen so well, and the person, as we know from Freud's research, doesn't bond very well with the mother figure, perhaps even has a bad relationship with the father figure, and this then might translate in later life into a greater propensity for mental illness, into a lesser propensity to handle stress, and of course all of these that we're talking about are external environmental factors in addition to what is already genetically there. Now here's the political point from this. These two and colleagues, not specifically these two, did research into families that were well off, well looked after, well provided for, had all the basics that you needed for life, all the things like proper food, accommodation. They were they were properly educated. They were given access to reasonable opportunities, and they were from, if you like, a kind of a well-off, or at least a reasonably well-off home. Now, in fact, in these groups, the epigenetic methylation, these little markers on the genes, through blood tests, were proved not to be as retained. And by proving that, these people were better able to handle stress. They were better able to handle the things that life shows at them. They showed, less of the hormone cortisone and stuff like that. They responded well to life's trauma. They were more robust. They were less possibly likely to suffer from mental illness. In other words, they had been provided for, their economic circumstances were good. Well, guess what? And here's where it relates to the Tory war on the poor. Yeah? Those who didn't have such good provision, those who were not economically even basically provided for, life chance-wise, basically provided for, well, they become more likely to become severely mentally ill to some extent, and guess what? They need more treatment through our ailing health service, deliberately ailing, I believe, set up to fail, through our mental health services, again deliberately defunded by the Tories, meant to fail so that they can bring in private contractors who can then just kind of sell off all the buildings and stuff like that, make loads of money for the health company like Branson, and provide really just a kind of service that might deal with people for sort of 72 hours after they tried to commit suicide. So my point is, let's keep fighting for our NHS, because here is evidence that proves a direct link between mental ill health and poverty. The kind of poverty that the Tories are imposing on people through benefit sanctions, through their corrupt regime, and any way they can. If you're interested in more, please look again at the research and it's in Discover magazine, which you'll be able to, I'm sure, Google and find online. Thanks for watching.